History is a fascinating subject, and history of technology generally ignites passion amongst the students. So the plan is to introduce to you the history of electric vehicles. It's a very fascinating history, and you would surely love it. Why is it important to understand history? Because the developments which we will be talking about, especially the advances of electric vehicle technology as of now, they are related closely with the development of internal combustion engines and the efforts of manufacturing electric vehicles even before that. So relating the technology to the state of society, relating the technology to the present, this linkage is established by the history. So it's the history of electric vehicles which is very fascinating, and it begins in the year 1813. So around 1813, this gentleman which you see with a white beard is Robert Anderson. Robert Anderson was a Scottish inventor, and what he did was he created an electric carriage, mind well, not a car but a carriage, and he used a large electric motor and a battery to drive that carriage. So earlier it was a horse carriages, but now in 1830s Robert Anderson bought this first electric carriage. In 1834, around about the same time, this gentleman which you see here below the photo of Robert Anderson is Thomas Davenport. This gentleman is an American, and what he did was a very interesting thing. He retrofitted a battery-powered motor in a car. So what he did was he removed the engine of the car and he retrofitted an electric motor powered by a battery, and this he did way back in 1834. So that is what Davenport did. 1837, Robert Davidson, he was again a Scottish guy. You see his photo at the top. This is Robert Davidson, and he built an electric car. And the batteries which he used were not the lead acid batteries, they were the zinc acid batteries which he used to build and power the electric car. So that was way back in 1837. Up to 1859, the batteries were single-use batteries. But because of the efforts of two physicists, these two gentlemen which are seen over here, one is Gaston Plant, this is a French guy, a French physicist. This physicist, invented a rechargeable lead acid battery. So he, that is Gaston Plant, along with the French scientist Camillac, who is shown below in this figure, these two gentlemen are credited with the perfection of what is known as a rechargeable lead acid battery, and this happened in around 1859. So this was a breakthrough. Use of rechargeable battery was a breakthrough in the electrical vehicle technology. Electric car had unique advantages, and we are talking about that era, about 1859. These electric cars, as compared to the engine-driven vehicles then, the technology then, electric cars were they were easy to drive. They didn't emit the smelly pollutant like the other cars of that time. We can imagine this. So there was no pollution. The engines which were used in that era, They were much more polluting. As compared to that, this electric car didn't emit a smelly pollutant. These cars were perfect for short trips around the city. We will be discussing what is called as range when we discuss the technology of electric cars. But the electric cars were perfect if you want to move through a short distance around the city. And earlier, because the roads were not that well developed, people used to travel around the city and for a shorter distance. And for that, electric car was perfect. Because the road conditions were poor outside the cities meant few cars of any type would venture farther. And the engine technology then required hand cranking. So you need to just rotate the crank and then start the engines. You must have seen this in some old movies, old English movies, that people crank, okay, use the hand to start the engine, right? So that was a pretty inconvenient thing when we talked about internal combustion engine cars. But with electric cars, there was no hand cranking. So it was quite easy to drive, no pollution, perfect for short trips, and no hand cranking. These all were the advantages of electric car, which were responsible for popularization of electric car in that era, around 1860s we are talking about. As I said, the batteries came, rechargeable batteries came along in 1859, and that made the electric car idea more viable. Around 1884, the person which you see in this figure is Thomas Parker. Yes, Thomas Parker deployed electric powered trams, not only cars, but electric powered trams, and he built prototype electric cars in England. Prototype electric cars in England. The other person who can be credited to the successful electric car is from US, and you see here the person with the hat in the black dress being seated. He is William Morrison. He's a chemist. He was a chemist, and around 1890 he developed the 6-passenger vehicle capable of running at a top speed related to that era of 14 miles to about 20 miles per hour. Okay, so William Morrison is credited to be the first successful electric car maker in the United States, and this happened around 1890. Okay, and that car had no hand cranking, no pollution, no fuel cost, and that model was made extremely popular. So this is the era which we are talking about when there's a progress of electric car from 1880s to around 1900. Then started the decline of electric car, and I have chosen this period where 1910 to 1935 is a period where you see now the downward graph for electric cars. And why has that happened? This is very interesting. Why the electric cars declined? That has to do with Henry Ford. Henry Ford produced very affordable cars, gasoline-powered cars, petrol-driven cars. The cars were costing only around $650 in 1912. And just to get you an idea, because the currency then was valued differently, but to get you an idea, the electric car then sold for about $1,700. Okay, so one of the factors that went against the electric cars was the price. Gasoline car was much cheaper. The second thing was the problem with the engine driven cars, the internal combustion engine driven cars, was hand cranking. But in 1908, Charles Kettering introduced an electric starter, and that electric starter eliminated the need for hand cranking. So hand cranking, which was seen as a disadvantage of internal combustion engine vehicles, now no longer remain a disadvantage because we can easily start. We would be easily starting the vehicle by using an electric starter. So this gave rise to more gasoline-powered vehicle sales. Better roads, larger distance to travel, cheap oil, poor electricity network, low-cost gasoline. This made the electric cars unaffordable, unviable, and they made the gasoline cars affordable and convenient. Look at this. Better roads means people need now wanted to travel larger distances. Electric cars had a smaller range. Because the electricity network was poor, so charging of the electric vehicles was a problem. There was no such problem for gasoline. Gasoline started coming because of refining activities. The gasoline was low cost, very dense energy source, and one could travel large distances by filling the fuel tank with gasoline. So that was very convenient as compared to the electric cars. And that resulted ultimately in 1935 to the disappearance of electric cars. Now, so we are seeing how there is a upward graph, electric cars coming up, enjoying a peak, and then now we see that there is a decline from 1910 to 1935. What next? We now know that we are again talking about electric cars. So the history is repeating. And why is that happening? So again, let us peep into the history. We are once again talking about electric cars thanks to the first hybrid car from Toyota in 1997. We are having interesting models and we'll be discussing those from Tesla, and they are giving you a mileage of 57 kilometers per liter, about 135 miles per gallon, equivalent to the gasoline vehicles. These fully electric cars, which are now being brought by Tesla and other companies, they are promising us clean environment. They are promising us no to climate change. They are promising us affordability. All these promises again are being talked about. Convenience is talked about. We are talking about clean, no pollution vehicles, and we are talking about beautiful vehicles from Tesla and other companies. So again, now premium variety, people who can afford, they are again moving to this market. It's a niche market, but yes, the market is now there for electric cars, and we will be seeing that in the future there will be an increasing market for electric cars, and we would probably again start seeing the decline of the internal combustion engine kind of cars. So that would be in the next 20 to 30 years, but yes, the trend is visible that it is possible that electric cars would once again compete and replace the internal combustion engine propelled cars. This understanding of the technology development would go a long way in this course, where we'll be discussing very fascinating features of electric vehicles. Thanks for now. Bye.